Did you ever wonder why your school never taught you these shocking facts? From history to science and everything in between, here are 5 things school never told you. Napoleon isn't actually short like everyone thinks he is. Despite being mismeasured by an inaccurate wooden yardstick while living in exile, Napoleon's true height was recorded at 5 feet 6 inches or 168 centimeters tall, which would make him around the average height for men in France today. His unusually short stature has made him an enduring figure of fun in popular culture, but it's safe to say that his actual height might have had less of an impact on his rise and fall than his ambitious military campaigns. Contrary to what many historical depictions show, Vikings didn't actually wear horned helmets. In fact, archaeologists have yet to find any evidence of horned helmets from the Viking Age. These fearsome-looking headdresses were likely a 19th century invention that coincided with a surge in Norse mythology-inspired artwork and literature. But where did this idea come from? Well, one theory is that the famous horned helmet is simply a misinterpretation of what the Romans wrote about the Nordics. Roman writers often described the Germanic tribes to the north as having a wild appearance and likened them to animals such as wolves, bears, and bulls, all of whom have horns. Perhaps the only thing separating the Vikings from these savage beasts in the eyes of the Romans was their ability to fashion metal helmets. And even though the Romans believed that the Vikings wore bull and bear skins, as well as wolf pelts, no archaeological evidence of this has ever been found either. The ancient Egyptians were huge fans of board games. In fact, the oldest known board game in the world was discovered in a tomb dating back to 2600 BC. This game, now called Snet, was played with a set of 30 sticks and was likely enjoyed by ancient Egyptian royalty, given its presence in royal tombs. Evidence suggests that it may have been used to settle arguments, with the winner taking their opponent's possessions. As the game became more popular throughout the kingdom, it took on religious overtones, with some believing that winning at Senet meant that they would win their way into the afterlife. Other games included a game very similar to backgammon and a war game that historians believe may have influenced later strategy games like chess. However, one of the most popular games was a children's game consisting of 15 discs arranged on a board in a manner similar to hopscotch. The players would then throw a stick and attempt to land it on a disc, removing it from the board successfully. Once all the discs were removed, the player would go again, but they would have to double the distance of their throw. If a player missed the disc, their turn would end, and it would be the next player's turn. While not exactly the same as hopscotch, it's safe to say that the two games are related. When it was built, the Eiffel Tower was only meant to be up for 20 years. Today, it's hard to imagine a Paris without the iconic wrought iron lattice tower dominating the skyline. However, when Gustave Eiffel submitted his plans for the tower in 1887, he and his fellow engineers intended it to serve as the entrance arch to the 1889 World S Fair and then be dismantled afterwards. Originally, the tower was supposed to be constructed out of a steel skeleton covered in white paint and lit up with gas lights, but these plans were scrapped due to cost concerns. Instead, the tower was built from wrought iron and was painted the color we all know today. Though it was accepted into the Paris cityscape after the fair, the Eiffel Tower was still only meant to stand for 20 years. There was a clause in the building permit that stated that if the tower was not demolished by 1909, it would have to be taken down. Ultimately, the tower's demolition was prevented by a radio engineer who realized that the tower's high vantage point would make it an ideal location for radio masts. It was given a new lease on life and continues to stand in the heart of Paris to this day. Contrary to what you might think, the Great Fire of London in 1666 didn't actually kill that many people. Between July and September of 1666, a fire broke out in Thomas Farriner's bakery on Pudding Street and spread throughout the city of London, destroying 13,000 houses and leaving 100,000 people homeless. With such massive destruction and loss of property, you would think that the death toll must have been astronomical. But surprisingly, only 5 people lost their lives during the blaze itself. In fact, there was only one known death directly caused by the fire. That was the death of a woman who jumped into a river with her child rather than risk the flames. The other 4 deaths that occurred during the fire were people who died trying to save their belongings. So, while the fire itself wasn't deadly, the lack of housing and subsequent outbreaks of disease killed hundreds in the following months. However, this was somewhat offset by the fact that many people fled the city before the fire reached their homes. With the death toll so low, authorities at the time were able to focus all their efforts on extinguishing the blaze and preventing it from spreading further. To put the fire out, they utilized hand pumps and water was dumped on the flames from buckets. However, because the pumps couldn't keep up with the speed that the fire was spreading, the decision was eventually made to destroy the buildings ahead of the firebreak. By doing this, the fire had less fuel to spread to and was ultimately stopped. Ancient Rome wasn't built in a day, but the Colosseum was. While construction of the Colosseum began under the Emperor Vespasian in 70 AD, it wasn't completed until 80 AD, meaning that it took just about a year to build. The first person to open a bottle of champagne was most likely a monk. When Benedictine monks noticed that the rising carbon dioxide levels inside of their sealed wine bottles caused the liquid to become fizzy, they shared the discovery with the rest of Europe. Champagne, France quickly became the center of winemaking, and the region was soon exporting large quantities of the newly invented sparkling wine to the rest of Europe. While you may picture champagne being served at fancy restaurants and celebrations today, the drink didn't become popular in France until much later. For centuries, champagne was looked down upon as a cheap, nasty beverage. Even during the French Revolution, revolutionaries would protest by drinking cheap champagne. It was only when the royal family was overthrown and there was no longer a king to associate the drink with that champagne became associated with luxury. If you want even more facts that you won't learn anywhere else, check out Amazing Facts About Your Body Part 2 and Amazing Facts About Your Body Part 3. And remember to subscribe if you haven't already. And thanks for watching.